Well, the last Assyrians is 53 minutes, and there's this segment that speaks about, it's about 6 minutes, that speaks about Christianity and Islam and how it goes to India. It's very broad, but I thought it's good to hear from non-Assyrian, what they say.
From 630 AD, Muslim Arabs invaded the Middle East. The Nestorians had been oppressed by the Persians as the Syrians by the Roman Byzantines. They welcomed the arrival of the Arabs, who rapidly established an empire which extended from India to Spain. The Nestorians and Syriacs knew the Arabs well. For centuries there were numerous churches in Arabia, and many Arab tribes were Christian. This Islam, which recognized Jesus and the prophets, did not frighten them. Peace reigned in the region and prosperity returned for all. For centuries, the majority of the population of the Middle East remained Christian and continued to speak their language, Aramaic, freely. At Damascus, the first capital of this Arab empire, the Mosque of Umayyad illustrates the meeting of these cultures. On this site, there first stood a temple to the Aramean god Hadad. Then the Romans transformed it into a temple for Jupiter. At the end of the 4th century AD, the temple became a church dedicated to St. John the Baptist. When the Muslims arrived in 636 AD, the Christians shared this place of worship with them. Their collaboration was so close that Christian artisans were often known to build and decorate Muslim monuments. It was only in 705 AD that this church was finally transformed into a mosque. Slowly, Islam and the Arabic language prevailed. To speak Aramaic became synonymous with being a Christian. In 750 AD, a new dynasty, the Abbasids, took power and founded Baghdad on the Tigris. A great library was constructed which gathered together all the written knowledge of the time. It was visited by students from every country and of every religion. Towns like Samarra, with its famous spiral minaret, were built everywhere. It was the golden age of the Arab-Muslim civilization, where Muslims and Christians lived side by side. The Nestorians and Syriacs had knowledge of the ancient cultures and undertook the phenomenal work of translating texts from Greek to Aramaic, then to Arabic. It is thanks to them that the philosophy, mathematics, and medicine of the Greeks were not lost. This knowledge was brought to the West by Spanish Muslims 3 centuries later. The reputation of these Christians was such that the doctors of the caliphs were often Nestorian.
Dès les premiers siècles, l'Église
From the 1st centuries AD, the Church of Mesopotamia was invested with a mission to spread the Christian message throughout the world. From the beginning, they moved toward the countries on the Asian continent.
Ils sont partis de la Méditerranée orientale.
They left from the Eastern Mediterranean and spread the Christian message to Persia, Central Asia, Tibet, India, and China.
Et cette église,
By the 10th and 11th century, this church counted more than 60 million followers.
et en nombre, c'était la
It
première.
was the biggest church in the world, and I would say, the most important.
Importance. Beaucoup d'évêques, de prêtres,
Many Chinese, Indian, and Mongolian bishops and priests owed obedience to the patriarch of the church in Baghdad, a church which, at that time, was very prosperous.
très prospère.
In 1623, the Jesuits discovered to their amazement that they were not the first Christians to enter China. At Jiangfu, they found a stele written in Chinese and in Aramaic, proof that Nestorian monks were present in the country since the 7th century AD. However, in 1258, the Mongols swept through Baghdad, massacring the Muslims and destroying the town. The contents of the great library were thrown into the Tigris. The Arab civilization crumbled. Because of ancient links established with the Mongol chiefs, the Christians were spared. The working relief on the Syriac monastery of Mar Benem in northern Iraq dates from this period. Mongol monarchs came to bow down before the tomb of St. Benem, where there is a Turco-Mongol inscription which reads, "That the peace of St. Benem, friend of God, comes down and rests on the Khan, his elders, and his wives." The Nestorian patriarch was himself an Asian, believed that Nestorianism would become the official religion of the empire. But in the end, the Mongols opted for Islam, thus putting an end to the hopes of the Arameans. At the end of the 14th century, Tamerlan, a fanatic Muslim from Central Asia, swept through Mesopotamia and massacred the Christians. The Nestorians escaped to the mountains, the home of the Kurds.
How did you feel when you hear this? Huh? Sad? Why?
Because, all of the Muslim illustrated with Muslims, and then we got contrary to being done. And it seems to be the story told to
شهارة تشغيل فاكشن وعلى الكشنة في استقبال دور شهارة أعيدكم.
What else?
Enjoy the Kardashian, Cassidy Schmechine, and Kai Schmechine, maybe Father Elkidian, Isurda, and Machiki. Maybe the Kai Schmechine, maybe Uzola.
What else?
I think it shows that there's almost 1,000 years of an incredibly vibrant history and culture that was attracted to people across an incredibly wide geographical area. So there were spiritual needs that were being met in China, India, Central Asia, and the Middle East that were attracted to a wide variety of people who were coming from pagan backgrounds, Taoist backgrounds, Hindu backgrounds, Buddhist backgrounds, Zoroastrian backgrounds, and even under Islam up until the 1200s, most early church writers in that period don't look at Islam as a religious threat until you have the rise of Tamerlan and the early Turks. Before that, Islam was just, it was there, and these were just another foreign power that was in charge, but it wasn't viewed as like a religious threat in the same kind of way. But I think it shows just the incredible vibrancy, for 1,000 years.
Anything else?
أنا books كمبارية بجوانانا ماني كمداري مسلمان
منقول لا منقول مغول back to the Matthews. Despite the great task he assumed, I was reading again. Matlima has authored 6 books, did 4 translations, and wrote more than 200 letters to different people in the church. He also had a religious discussion with the Khalifa al-Mahdi.
Excuse me,
You
Rabbi.
heard about the book, لا?
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Ah.
فقرت عن هذه الديتيلز. بس تيان فقرة.
I'll tell you at the end. I'll tell you.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so you heard about the conversation between Al-Mahdi and Khalifa and Martin Mateus? There's a book called Dialogue or Conversation between Al-Khalifa Mahdi and Martin Mateus. Martin Mateus was allowed to transfer the seat, a politician, of Patriarch to Baghdad, an honor permitted to the Church of the East alone. Martin Mateus also, during his patriarchy, he witnessed the rule of 5. Sorry, the rule of 5 kings. So he was, he was a patriarch for a long time. And I think the last one was Al-Mahdi when he went, he was an old man and he was with him. So he liked him. He used him as an advisor. He always visited his palace and sat in his, diwan to conversate with him. And there's a book called أحوال النصارى في خلافة بني العباس. It's written in French and translated in Arabic. You will hear a lot, if you read it, there's a lot of stories. It's a storybook. It tells about, each Khalifa, how he treated Christians and how were Christians responding to that. And you will see that during the time of these, how Martin Mateus used to go to the Khalifa's place and sit and talk with him, and how he answered them. Very smart answers that, sometimes the Khalifa would try to trick him with his questions, but he was able to answer a smart answer. The only thing that is left from his book is some of his letters that are published by Brown, and I think even Rufail Bidawid had that thesis on them. Him to be natural administrator and a staunch advocate of the Church of the East, not only clerics produced literature, but also educated layperson and physician. Among them were famous Bakhtisho, the family of Bakhtisho, they were all physicians. They graduated from a school of Gundi Shapur, that was a med school. These families served the Khalifa. They were the best doctors in that time. So they all worked with the Khalifa, and they have, any time a good physician is in the palace, has a great influence on the king. And all the physicians were Christians, Nestorians, Church of the East. The best known translator, he also communicated with him, was Hunayn ibn Ishaq and his family, of course, an Arab Christian from the Church of the East, from Hira, who translated medical texts, Dali, and mathematical works of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, etc. The Arab used the term Ilm al-Kalam, which means the science of speaking about God, which means theology. Ilm al-Kalam means theology. They use these philosophy and mathematics to produce theology. Although the politics of the Abbasi Khalifa caused massive conversion of Christians to Islam, the Church of the East could expand within the Muslim empire toward the West. It was, one of the law during the Abbasi was you cannot convert a Muslim. So what they did, that could not stop them. They went to Damascus, to Egypt, to Jerusalem, Alexandria, and to the Gulf, especially Qatar, where we find eminent author like Marisat Ninwe, who was from Jibril Qatraya, Iyo Qatraya. Those are all authors that rose from Qatar, where Al Jazeera is broadcast. Even more significant is the well-organized missionary enterprise toward the east. Monks sent by Martin Matthäus along the Silk Road spread the gospel together with the culture and liturgy among people of Persia, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, Turkey, Mongolia, China, Tibet, India. The Church of the East became increasingly enculturated in the 7th century. Christianity was called the religion of the light, and Christ was presented as the absolute illuminated Buddha. Thus began a long and successful missionary enterprise which encompassed nearly a millennium of expansion into much of Asia. There was 20, of course, after, during the time of, in one of his letters, he says, he'd probably say to a guy named Sergis, he said, I can proudly say that there is no place that we don't have a priest, a bishop, a deacon to serve our people. 18 metropolitan and dozen of bishops represent the church of the church in most of Asia. Mark Timotheus is writing about all the provinces under the jurisdiction of Patriarch C. The Indians, the Chinese, the Tibets, the Turks, they're all under his jurisdiction. In light of this evangelical prayer, one may comment in the early Middle Age, in light of this evangelical prayer, one may well ask, what were the key to the Nestorian success? What do you think would be the key? Education. What else? Emanuta. Monks. Mashkhatta. Okay. What else? Strong administration. Educated staff. La. Of course, comes then faith, passion, etc., etc., etc. But those are, faith and love of God and passion. If you don't have the body to incarnate this in, you don't get anywhere. Adiyah, we have Imanut in our church. La? Itlan Imanut. And we have passion, we have faith, but unfortunately we don't have that body, that staff, administration, to incarnate this love and passion and faith in it, to increase. We're trying just to keep what we have, preserve it. And what happens when you try to preserve your fruits? They start one by one. La? If you don't produce more fruits, that's what's going to happen. See, they never preserve. They stopped them in Mesopotamia. They went to the west. They went to the east. They never stopped. That's why, even there were Christians in Jerusalem. There were Christians in Damascus, Alexandria, and all these places. But they went there. They started preaching and you know, converting people. The Nestorian monuments tell of a person named Alopi, who first brought the religion of light, the luminous religion, to Celestia Kingdom in 653, which was in China. 3 years later, the Emperor Tai Tansi issued an edict of tolerance of Christians. He ordered that Christian scripture to be translated into Chinese and provide for church to be built. Subsequent emperor generally favored Christians, many of whom rose to prominent position in the society. Of course, you know, that changes. About Christian in China, you know, we know that, maybe, I don't know if you heard that, but in the 7th century, that was maybe before that, but we know that in 1652, they found this monument, Hakipa Gura, at Alurkive, the shamanic, you know, names of the bishop and patriarch and monks and priests and deacons who went to China. So, after like 9th century, we know that, you know, some of the scholars say that Christianity was, you know, ended in China again. Lithuania, so there were no more Christians. And after that, it started another mission to China, and that one lasted till the 14th century, 13th century. Okay, so there were two missions. The first one in the 7th century and the other one at the end of the 9th century. However, the imperial edict in 84 against the foreign non-Confucian religion, brought the end to religion tolerance in China, and persecution followed for Christian as well as Buddhists and Zoroastrians. Monasteries were closed, destroyed, and monks were forced to return to secular life. The Tang dynasty eventually collapsed in 907. When some monks visited China in 981, they were unable to find Christianity remaining. However, there are records of Arab travelers encountering Christian churches and even monasteries in China during the 10th and 11th century. Though Christianity did not experience a revival there until the time of Mongol, as we shall see below. So, you know, we know that there was Christianity in 7th century, and then in the 9th century, they just, Chinese, they're crazy, huh? They just shut up everything and kicked everybody out. And then, you know, at the end of the 10th century, they went there, this time, I mean, yeah. They went there and there was no Christian. Another group of mission went, and they started a new one till, of course, the time of Mongol. Some people say, when they read that monument, they say that Christianity was watered down. Like, what do I mean by that? Like, they try to, you know, like, not to be strict, okay, allow some paganism or Buddhism tradition or habits or lifestyle, but that was not true. What they did, they took some symbols of their culture and explained Christianity through these symbols. That's called theology. So they did not, what they did was not just give them you know, already made theology that was used in the East, they created a new theology. And theology is not something pre-made. Theology means that you take the faith you have and you try to explain it through some cultural elements that you live in. It's faith, Bible, incarnated in culture. So what they did, they understand the culture of Chinese, and they explain their faith through their culture. That's why we see in that symbol, in that monument, some of the symbols that are Chinese symbols, that are not Christian symbols. But that was what they did. That was the reason for that. And that's theology. And I think that's what made Christianity prevail in China. Especially at the beginning, because you will see in the history of like Christianity in China, when the Jesuit went to China, they tried to preach. It was very difficult. They could not enter China easily. That was one smart move. They did not water down the theology or the faith. They just explain it in the term and in the culture that they will understand. Okay? So I want to go down. We know, like, the church was expanding. The principality of those kings of Chinese Turkestan became Christian. One of the most celebrated mass movement was into the church, probably many 200 ones, occurred among the Kirai Turks, and a group living in the shore of Lake of Balkan, Mongolia. So in this time, like, there were a group of Turks that some of them were Muslim, and the argument is that Turks were all Muslim, but we see that most of them were not Muslim. There is a great number of them that was Christian. The legacy of these missionaries is still preserved, and we'll see, how Christianity was prevailed in East, in not Turkey, but in like Balkan, Azerbaijan, all these places, through some writings on the tombstones and other signs that are preserved by the history. Also Marco Polo, you heard of Marco Polo? He was a traveler. He also mentioned that in India there was Christians. There's even spectacular that there were a large number of church of the East Christian in Philippines when the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. So you see, most of the Asia, Far Asia, they were. I would not say that they were all Christian, but they were churches, and they were. Of course, some of the people say that some of them were missionaries, some of them were just people who, merchants who were visiting and traveling, and they stay there. So they brought their own priests and deacons with them, to preserve their faith in Asia. But we know that it was both, a combination of both. During the time of Abbasi, the Church of the East started to losing a lot of monasteries. I don't think this you will see it some other place, but this is what I wanted to mention. How the church collapsed. It was not Mongolian, it was not Tamerlan. Maybe those had a great impact, but let's see how it started. During the time of Abbasi, when the Church of the East started losing a lot of monasteries, and the power of them, of monastic movement, started to decrease, I believe this will be one of the reasons that the Church of the East will not have the power and the influence needed to convert the Mongolians to Christianity. There is a book called Ashur Christianity, بالعربي معلش أشور المسيحية. John Vier locates more than 250 monasteries in that book, and he speaks about monastic movement in Mesopotamia, and he's mentioning that we see the number of monasteries from the 7th and 8th century was about 300, 400 in north, like Amrafino, Mosul, Duhok, Erbil, and these places, and it was decreased to like 80, 60, 70, which is a lot, a big number. So from that, I believe that, the reason behind that was, Islam is a very secular, little of a spiritual religion. It's more secular. It's all about, desires and marrying and having children. And they say al-mal wal-banun, means money and family is more important than anything else. So that mentality started in the people, like you live among these people and they think like that, they believe in God, you believe in God, so that will influence you. A lot of people lost that passion to become monks and nuns. They went more into getting married and having children. And a lot of people say that Christianity or Assyrian were 80 million people, but because they were all monks, they chose to be monks. We were decreased in number and became 1 million. But that's opposite of the truth. Christianity in the East started decreasing when we lost that passion for a monastic movement, to be in monasteries, because these were the life of the church, the spirit of the church. And when you lose your spirit, you're a dead body. The Mongolian Empire, perhaps the empire in the history, no empire in the history has risen spectacularly as the one of Mongolia. In less than 80 years, a band of warriors, originally comprised several men, grew to an empire that encompassed all from the Pacific Ocean to Danube River. This story is about one of the most dramatic series conquest of the history. I just took this from somewhere that was speaking about Mongolia, but I saw it interesting that within 80 years, how this empire, from a group of people, a tribe, Khashoggi, was able to conquer the world from China till Damascus within 80 years. In the 12th century, various of Turks and Mongols tribes roamed the steppes of Mongolia. One of these tribes was Mongol. Around 1130, the Mongol emerged as a powerful tribe, defeating neighbors and forcing the Jin Empire to northern China to pay tribute. So they started growing, and they coming toward east. And they came to Baghdad. In 1258, they conquered Baghdad. And what they did, there was, remember the library, Beit al-Hikmah, was the House of Wisdom, which was filled with books. They took all these books and threw them in the river. They say that the river turned to blue. The water of the river for days was turned to blue because of the ink. Mongolians were very close to Christians. Some of them were married to Christians, like from Genghis Khan and his children. They actually gave a very, they were also uneducated people, so who will help them? Christian. So they gave a lot of power to Christian. And what happened there was that Christians start taking advantage of that power. This is the second reason. See, when you abuse God-given, like that God-given gift of freedom that you start enjoying, what they did, they were, insulting Muslims and closing their shops and persecuting them and killing them. Exactly what Muslims are doing. Even like one of the patriarchs of the Church of the East was Mongolian, was Chinese. In 1281, there was this man named Marcos. He was a disciple of another monk named Barsoma. These two people were monks, and they decided to travel to go to Jerusalem, to visit all these holy places on Holy Land. And they were told that, after they arrived to the east in Mesopotamia, they were told that it's too dangerous to go there. So they just said, let's go and visit the patriarch. And they visited the patriarch, and Marcos was ordained metropolitan to be sent to China. And then the patriarch died after 2 years. So what happened? Marcos was elected patriarch. And he said, I don't want to be patriarch. I don't know language, I don't know nothing. They said, no, you are close to the family, you understand the Mongolian culture, you're Chinese, so you become a patriarch. And then during this time, they sent even Barsoma to, he was very close to the king. They gave him a palace. He knocked down the church, and he built a beautiful church. And he moved the church, of course, to Maraga. I believe you heard that many times from His Holiness. He always mentioned that. He mentioned it last time in the youth conference. So, he started very nice and thoughtful movement. He tried to connect with the Roman Empire. I think he was feeling the danger of the Islam, that they were conquering Jerusalem, and they're trying to work with the Romans to get back Jerusalem. So they sent Barsoma, one of the monks. And the interesting thing there was that the cardinal who was questioning Barsoma and asked him if, do you recognize the Pope as, the head of the church? He replied, never has any man from the Pope, come to us, Eastern Christian. The Holy Apostle, Martoma, and his disciple Maradde and Marmari taught our fathers the true faith, and so we hold it intact to this day. They respected the Pope, but they never hold him as a head of the church. And that was one of the arguments Ashur Sora was making, that the Church of the East always saw the Pope as the head of the church. And that was not true, because we see in the whole history of our church that they did have a respect for the Pope as a bishop of Rome, where the two apostles, two great apostles were martyred, but he was never considered a head of the church. And we see this answer of Rabban Batsoma to the cardinal. Of course, he sent him back with gifts, and he also sent his crown as a gift to Maryam Ala in Marab. We don't have a lot left. Unfortunately, with all this influence, the patriarch being Chinese, and Christians have all these, let's say, sensitive position in the Mongolian Empire, they were never able to convert the Mongolian to Christian, and when they had to choose, they favored Islam, and it was then Mongolian, of course, the one in Chinese converted to Buddhism, and Mesopotamia in 1335 favored Islam. After that, the situation was ripe for the next conqueror to sweep in from the east, Timur, in 1336 to 1405, known in the west as Tamerlane. يميل بالعربي تيمور لانك. It was Timur who effectively dealt the death blow to the Church of the East. A Mongol Turk and fanatic Islam, and a fanatic Islam dreamed of an empire that would surpass the Genghis Khan rule from the first capital, Samarkand. At his death, his realm stretched from Syria to the Chinese Turkestan and whatever. In his barbarous campaign of conquest, he wiped out most of what remained of the church in Central Asia and Mesopotamia. Literally, he wiped out. He did not leave any church or any monastery. And Christians were forced to leave and move up to the north. Hundreds of thousands of Christians, Muslims, and Hindus and pagans were were indiscriminately slaughtered, and this troop burned whole cities and left pyramids of skulls as testimony of military powers. They built pyramids of heads. It was a mortal wound from which the Church of the East would never recover. Unfortunately, in truth, the Church had been in weak condition from some time before Timur arrived. How had this come about? There are both external and internal factors, those which reflect the social, religious, and political context of the Church was surrounded by, and those which revealed its inner spiritual health. Among them, perhaps the most basic hindrance of growth was the enormous geographical distance involved in communicating between the church center in Mesopotamia and the external Asia situation which European Christianity did not share. Common reason, because Rabbi were Krista, Litwa Msayta قد have a communication, have a leadership to be in effect, قد مصيوة هماشة نقليوة, and if they fall in trouble they could fix nor can we ignore the crippling effect of either persecution or suppression under the Persian, the Arab, and finally Mongol Turks who converted to Islam. Third, the persistence of Christianity as a minority religion, lacking political power and conceived as a foreign faith, left it unable to leave any permanent impact on Asia. Again, these were situations which European Christianity never shared, apart from persecution prior to Constantine. Lastly, the phonetic nature of the people in the region where Church of the East was prevailing contributed to all other factors. In Inashid, Middle East, Christianity, they are phonetic. And even in Islam, like when Iran was converted to Islam, they split Islam to Sunni and Shia, yeah? Because they were Persian. They never wanted to be Christian. And there's now a group of Iranian that is arising that say we're not Muslim anymore. We're Zoroastrian. Nah? What's the name again? Zoroastrian, Zoroastrian. Nah? So we should go back to that religion. Same as what's happening now in us. It's like we need another seva, another sword to split us. We did not suffer enough. So there's a group of of Assyrian, I will not say Christian, that they're saying we're not Christian. We should go back and worship Allah Ashur. See, what's this? Cherry, modula, seed. You put this in the ground, and after years, it will become a tree, and it will produce more cherries. You can't go back, and you would recognize, I am, this tree, it came from this seed. If it wasn't for this seed, this tree would never become, this tree would never exist. But you cannot take that tree and put it back into the seed and say, you know what, no, because this tree came from the seed, it has to go back in the seed. That's what these people are trying to do to us. They try to take us, after we became a tree, big, that spread from east, from Baghdad to China, to all these worlds, and it was trimmed, and now it still exists. They want to take it back and put it in that seed again. It's against the law of nature. You can't do that. We are proud to be Assyrian, yes. We love, we always go back and say that, Allah Ashur was the god of our ancestors, and we had all this civilization, all these accomplishments, and we influenced the history of humanity with our contribution. But that was a seed that eventually became a tree. We cannot go back into that seed. Ever. Thank you very much.